welcome to Beyond the Buzzwords by Easy AI. It's an Easy AI show. So Beyond the Buzzwords podcast is where we get real about AI in business with no hype and no jargon. It's just a practical conversation with leaders like yourself using AI to work smarter. And yeah, so it is brought to you by Easy AI and to make tech work for people. So the goal is to make tech work for people. And yeah, so Jeremy here is the founder and owner of Scalafai, and I would love to introduce Jeremy and welcome him. And please introduce about Scalafai and yourself. If you could start with an introduction about yourself, what inspired you to start Scalafai, and a bit about Scalafai in a very short and simple way for people to grasp in few seconds. That would be awesome. Thanks, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nala. It's a pleasure to be here. My experience is really as a product and an operations leader over the past 20 years, working with small organizations, startups, and helping them grow to become industry leaders. So that includes developing talent, putting in processes, and especially building out the technology to help the organization scale. And now with AI and the amazing opportunities, scaling with AI helped create Scalafai. Right? My experience in my most recent startup, I saw as the organization got bigger, it became harder and harder to stay in sync with and understand what's happening in the business day to day. So back when we had 5 people, it was very easy for us to exchange messages, Slack messages, emails, get in sync, and then move on and go about our work. As the organization grew, it got to the point where my team was scattered all across the United States. I had a service team in South Africa, tech team in India, team in Philippines. Something just as simple as, hey, where do we stand on this? That could be, could take several hours to piece together information from different systems. You have people working different schedules. So it was just harder to run the business. And it was something that the quantitative metrics couldn't help me with, right? I had KPIs, I had data warehouses, I had Power BI dashboards that were incredible. I had numbers for numbers and numbers, but they can only tell me so much about the business of what was happening. And in my experience, what I found was a lot of the information I needed was already in the emails and the Slack messages and the meeting notes. It just needed the technology to be able to extract that insight. And so when I saw Chat GPT starting to become a household name and what was possible, I thought, okay, now it's time, and that's how Scalafai was born.
Amazing! Oh, that's an amazing and a brilliant explanation. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so I would love to ask you a couple of questions regarding Scalafai. If you could explain or give a brief about what's that one automation that you've implemented using Scalafai that had a surprising return on investment. So it could be either financially or in time saved.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. The original vision for the technology, for the platform that we built, was what I would call that real-time status update. Whether you're using some companies we talked are still using spreadsheets, believe it or not, to track their projects or their initiatives or against their goals. Some are using different work platforms, the Monday.coms and the Trellos and the Asanas of the world. Then the original vision was, okay, let's build a platform where you don't have to automate, where you don't have to enter those manual updates, right? We'll just automatically extract that. And that's worked well. The biggest surprise coming out of that was, now that we've got all that information pulled in and we've got that married with a generative AI engine and the context of your goals and the details that you're trying to accomplish, the generative AI engine that we're able to use very much like a ChatGPT or a Claude. As much as I love Claude, having the context of what you're working on and then being able to chat with that and say, hey, give me an email update to the stakeholders. There's a lot of people that are still talking about prompt engineering. My most famous prompt so far, what's the latest? So
Yes,
it's much more conversational, right? I can log into my workspace,
right.
And just say, what's the latest? And it already has the context of, oh, we're talking about this project and here are the goals and here's the progress. So it's a much more human interaction versus let me have to craft all this, prompt in a very specific way to extract the information that I need. So that was a very pleasant surprise.
Amazing. So Scalafy is based on your experience and knowledge and what has worked for you with your enormous amount of knowledge you've gathered in the years of your experience in business and in your career all together. So I think anyone experiencing the use of Scalafy would have access to that um, brilliant knowledge and in one place. So I think have you? I mean, if I were to ask you the question of who has brought Scalafy to where it is today, including yourself and the knowledge and the skill set to develop Scalafy and bring it to the place where it is today. If you could explain to us your ideal client profile and who it would benefit the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been very fortunate, with my background in operations and product. That means I'm not a developer, right? I know enough technical things to design the platform. I'm very fortunate.
That's exactly what we need for Scalafy.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate though to have a wonderful engineering team, full stack engineer, UX engineer, data scientist, who are able to help take the vision and then make that into reality. And so when we take that technology now and take that to our ICPs, our ideal client profile, we're starting with organizations that are typically about 50 to maybe 500 employees or workers in the organization. Typically office workers, we're seeing the most traction right now in services type of organizations, marketing services, agencies, my old stomping ground of the market research industry, technology, service providers, tech project management, where it's a lot of project oriented work, right? The common theme, regardless of whether you call it a project or an initiative or a ROC, we have some clients that are starting to use it for OKRs, objectives, and key results. The common theme is the organization or the business is here on this date, and they want to accomplish something by some future date, right? And there's typically some milestones and some ways that they're measuring success along the way. And so once you load that information into the platform, then the platform can just look at the communications, the emails, the messages, the meeting notes, and just continually reassess what's happening. Are you on track? If so, great. If not, let's let the team know, and let's help pinpoint what's going on and give them some coaching to help get back on track.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I'm glad you described your ideal client profile and who you're helping the most and who's seeing results from using Scalafy platform. So and the other very important question is what's a time or where did your team face the most resistance when introducing and the use of Scalafy? So that's something that could help those people or your target audience who are resistant in using your systems. So
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wish I could answer the question with the verb faced in past tense, but I'd say we're still very much facing. This is a learning journey for a lot of us. And there's a tremendous amount of change happening right now, and it's difficult for anybody to say, here's exactly what things are going to look like in the next couple of years, and certainly 10 years from now, what's going to happen. There's more questions than answers, and I get that. That can be scary. We certainly have seen some of the kind of the things you would expect around AI, of concerns about job loss and what am I going to do. I think specific to our platform, probably the biggest question that we get is around like data security and compliance and privacy. It is amazing how we can basically have this AI look at emails and messages and meeting notes and extract that information. But questions, very good questions about, well, okay, where's that data coming from? Where is it stored? What are you doing with it? Are you using it to train your model? And the answer is no, absolutely not. Is the data secure? Yes, absolutely. It's on AWS. This is not a vibe coded project. This is enterprise grade infrastructure on Amazon AWS, data that's encrypted. Yeah, we're going through SOC 2 compliance. We've gone through Microsoft and Google certification. So we just have a very open dialogue about that data transparency and security.
That's great. I think those are the barriers to entry in this space, especially enterprise level clients who could greatly benefit these systems. So I think that's very important to highlight. All communications regarding Scalafai being compliant. Thanks, Jeremy. That's very helpful. And if I were to ask you one last question. So this conversation is basically an introduction to those who might be interested in using Scalafai and getting to know more about you. So one last question to help them understand. What would you do differently if you had to start your AI journey again today?
That's a great question. What would I do differently if I had to start my AI journey today? So I think a couple things. Usually I'm on the bleeding edge of technology. Back in mid to late 2022, I heard about GPT and generative AI, but I was so busy as a CEO of a very fast growing startup. I was so heads down. That was something I wanted to get to, but just couldn't. Right, so I didn't prioritize.
I'm sure there's so many out there exactly in that position today. So that's the reason for this question. I mean, I'm sure there's so many others curious to learn from leaders like yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it took getting into a tough spot where it kind of forced my hand. It's one of those days where I'm bouncing from meeting to meeting to meeting. And meanwhile, a salesperson say they've got this big deal ready to close, but it's a fairly large company. They've got all this paperwork requirement, and they had asked for our supplier vetting program, which we had. Supplier vetting in that former industry was very, very important. We had a program. It was very robust. I just didn't have a nice document that was ready to present to the client. And I'm thinking to myself, I can create this document, but it's going to take an hour or two, or maybe even more, until it's something that got the quality that I would expect. And I didn't have time to do that, bouncing from meeting to meeting. And I thought, what am I going to do? And the idea is well, maybe this is the time to try this ChatGPT thing. And fortunately, I had read enough about this thing called prompt engineering, and you need to give it context. So I pieced together the best prompt I could and just kind of hope for the best. And I saw the results coming back, and it was shockingly good. And this is even back in, mid to late 2022. And it was enough where it got me maybe 60 to 70% of the way. And, I still made some pretty substantial edits, but it took it from a 2-hour project to 20 minute, 25 minutes, something that I could squeeze in between meetings. and that was the first time like, okay, I wish I had gone and started that journey sooner, because I would have saved myself so much time.
That's so true. Yeah, I'm sure like, you could be an inspiration to all those who are exactly in that position. And I think that's the goal of Scalafai, to help, to get things done sooner and in a better quality. And Jeremy, if you could state a couple of frequently asked questions about Scalafai, Sophia, and we could cover that in this discussion. Would love to know what are the most frequently asked questions that those who are using Scalafai has at the moment, and we could share that with our audience today.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the frequent questions is, okay, it sounds amazing. You can connect with my data, but what exactly do I do with it? Right? Because it's a horizontal platform. You can use it across industries. You can use it across different functions, HR versus marketing for sales. I'd say, okay, the common theme is, do you have things you want to accomplish? Because I've talked to companies that say, well, we don't really have goals. I say, okay, well, let's forget labels for a second.
Yeah.
Are you trying to accomplish something? Well, sure. Is that something time bound by the end of the second quarter? Oh, absolutely. Okay, well, then let's put those into the platform, and then the platform will help give you those. And also helps give you focus, because one of the other questions I've got frequently is like, well, I don't have a big team, or my I've got a small team and we're in the same office. Can the platform help me? And my answer would be a resounding absolutely. It helps in two ways. One, I've seen people work in the same office, different teams, and be out of sync. So being in the office does not necessarily mean you're in sync is one thing.
Yeah.
But either way, just having that focus, right? Especially as a small organization, I'm sure you can relate. You feel like you get pulled 30 different ways in a given day, right? So having one place to go back and say, look, here are my goals. Here are the things I'm trying to accomplish. This is my North Star. It's easy to get busy with all this other stuff. And a lot of that is important. You have to get it done, but let me come back and get the focus, and then go through, and then it comes into the Gen AI of like, well, how is this possible? How can, multi-billion-dollar companies like ChatGPT or OpenAI and Anthropic's Claude not do this? And my answer is it's in the context. The key with generative AI comes down to the context. And I part of this, testing this theory, I was able to go in and extract a bunch of my emails from Google Mail into, I think it was a CSV file, about a year ago. Yeah. I loaded that into Claude, and I said, okay, what happens? Like, if that becomes they call it a project in Claude, right? That becomes my project. That's the context. Can I chat with that? Can I ask it questions? And when the answer to that came, absolutely, and the answers were really good and only getting better, that was when I knew we were really onto something interesting.
Incredible. Okay, I think that that pretty much covers a lot of things about Scalafai.